So now we'll look at our last big class of mollusks, and this is my personal favorite, cephalopods. So if you remember, cephalopod literally means head foot. So like a lot of mollusks, they have a muscular foot and a visceral mass. With cephalopods, it's kind of like the same body part. So cephalopods are known for having tentacles. So a ring of tentacles usually surrounds their mouth. They actually have a beak, and some of them actually have a radula as well. So the beak actually, it literally looks like a bird's beak, and squid have this and are known for it the most. Octopi actually have a beak and a radula. So the tentacles often have suction cups on them, and they all have at least a small internal shell, if not an external shell. So a nautilus, which is this guy here, has an actual full-on shell. Squid have a pen, which is a thin, hard piece along the inside of the body. Octopi do not have a small internal shell, so they are the exception. Cephalopods are known for having really advanced eyes, really complex eyes that can see very well. Oftentimes they give off ink to distract their prey. It's a way of clouding the water so that their prey or predators have a hard time navigating. And then they also move by way of jet propulsion. So you think of the way a squid moves or an octopus, water moves in through a siphon. So just like bivalves have a siphon that draws water in and then shoots it out, these guys do too, and that's how they move. They have a really advanced nervous system, and actually, octopi are known for being extremely intelligent. Given how sort of low they are on the cladogram, they're super smart. They're thought to be as smart as dogs, so that's pretty cool. The nautilus or nautiloids, these guys again have a spiraling shell. They're kind of funny if you YouTube them swimming. They swim in kind of a funny manner, but they do shoot water out through their excurrent siphon, which is right about here. And so they kind of shoot through the water, but with this shell, they kind of awkwardly kind of bumble along through the water. That shell is interesting because if you see the inside of a nautilus shell, which you've probably seen before, each of these is like a little chamber, and the chambers they're filled with gas, and it helps it with buoyancy control. So basically, the animal can adjust its height in the water as it's swimming by either holding on to more oxygen that it's drawing out of the water or by getting rid of the gas. So that's pretty cool. Um, these guys have really good chemosensory organs, so they can detect chemical signals in the water really well, and they can avoid predators that way. Another group within this are the cuttlefish. So this is going to be, actually here's a whole category of coleoids, so that's going to be cuttlefish, squid, and octopi. But we'll start with cuttlefish. These guys have 10 appendages, 8 arms, and 2 tentacles. And the cuttlefish, a lot of people like. It's kind of a cute little animal, and the word cuddle is always kind of nice. um, but these guys have actually a large fin that surrounds their visceral mass, and it sort of flutters as they swim through the water. So that also aids in their movement. So the thing about the appendages is important. Oftentimes people confuse arms from tentacles. The arms tend to be the shorter appendages, and the tentacles tend to be a little bit longer. So with squid, for example, they have 10 appendages arranged in 5 pairs, and one pair is a little bit longer than the other. So it's kind of the same as the cuttlefish. 8 of them are arms, and then 2 of them are actual tentacles. The fins on the outside of the mantle up here, these are really good for slow, sort of undulating movement. So they move in a similar way as the cuttlefish, but they mostly rely on that jet propulsion. Here's their eyes. The pen it almost looks like a spine, but again, they have no spine. These guys are truly invertebrates, but it runs through the body just like this. Squid can become enormous. They can be up to 44 feet long. The giant squid, or here's a picture of the colossus squid. They might even get bigger than that, but we're just able to see what we find. And if they live in the deep sea, we don't see them much, so we might find a dead body. But what's interesting is that scientists have actually estimated how large these squid can get based on some of the scars they leave on deep diving whales. So a sperm whale, for example, dives down really deep, and they like to feed on these giant and colossus squid. And sometimes they come back up and they have pucker marks from the squid's tentacles have those suction cups on them, and sometimes they have little hooks in them. So the sperm whale comes up with all these battle wounds, and scientists can kind of estimate how big the squid might have been based on the size, the radius of these sucker marks. And sometimes they're huge. They're like as big as a tire. So that tells them that there was a huge squid that sperm whale got in a fight with. Finally, we have the octopus. This is my personal favorite. 8 arms and no tentacles. They do not have true fins, and their body is basically like a very thin sack, almost some people say like a plastic bag in the water. Um, they're very good at crawling over things. They can actually cut out of the water sometimes, and they'll chase. There was a video out recently of an octopus that chased a crab out onto land and got it, and then just went back in the water. Um, Octopi can actually be trained to do things. So they can be trained to perform simple tasks. They have very advanced eyes, and they're very, very sensitive to touch. And there was an octopus in the Monterey Aquarium that was so sensitive to touch. He actually liked to be touched. He would kind of crawl out of the water, and his caretakers would pet him and rub him down, and he really seemed to like that. And then the way they kept him in his tank, because he could escape. He was an escape artist. And because they are so, their bodies are so thin and fragile and they have no real hard parts, they can actually squeeze through a tiny, tiny hole, a very tiny hole. So they're hard to keep as aquarium pets. And so this particular octopus kept getting out at night when nobody was around. And he actually snuck into other tanks with other animals and would kill and eat those animals and then go back into his own tank and pretend that nothing happened. So to fix this, they basically lined the outside of his tank with AstroTurf, which is a texture and a touch sensation that the octopus really hated. And so that's how they kept him in his tank, was they just made the area around his tank so unpleasant for him to touch. So they're very touch sensitive. Some octopi are poisonous. Others will mimic those that are poisonous. So if you ever get to Google the mimic octopus, that's actually a species that mimics all kinds of things, and it's crazy. It's one of the coolest, craziest animals. They can change colors. Their skin have these pneumatophores, which are cells that basically kind of they dilate, they kind of open and close the color pigment, and so that can make the octopus look really dark or really light. Okay, so octopi, as far as feeding goes, they do have a mouth. Outside of it is that sharp beak, and again, some of them actually have a radula under the beak too. Depends on where they live in terms of what they eat. Sometimes they'll eat other cephalopods, but mostly they'll eat anything they can get. They're usually not quick enough to eat fish, but they can get crabs and clams and all kinds of little invertebrates. All of them are carnivores. There are no vegetarian octopi. They reproduce sexually, and so they do physically mate with each other. They use different color cues to initiate mating, and then the females will lay eggs in these egg cases, and some of them end up suspended in the water in these beautiful sort of chains. Others, depending on the species, are little clumps that you find on rocks. And then here's the little babies. So this is a great picture showing the chromatophores, or the pigment changing cells. Here, this is when they're open, so when the octopus wants to look darker. And here's what they look like when they're kind of closed or they're not as dilated. And it's kind of cute because baby octopi can't control their color changing, so they're just kind of like constantly changing color. It's kind of fun to watch. Okay, so that is it for phylum Mollusca, and that's it for cephalopods. So moving on in this category, you guys will see a little bit about them in an Edpuzzle game. So this is Edpuzzle video. It's called the Survival Game, and this is about mollusks. And then here's some more fun videos. You'll see how scallops move, and then a really funny video of an octopus. So enjoy.